When you think of Viking food, you probably imagine giant slabs of roasted meat, barrels of ale, or maybe salted fish pulled from the North Sea. But the truth about what fueled these warriors is far more fascinating. The Vikings didn't just survive on brute calories, they thrived on foods that today we might call superfoods. These forgotten staples weren't only packed with nutrients, they were carefully chosen to give them strength, endurance, and resilience in some of the harshest living conditions on Earth. From grains more powerful than quinoa, to seeds richer in omega-3 than salmon, to berries that could outmatch modern vitamin supplements, the Viking diet was a science of survival. And much of it has been lost to history, overshadowed by myths of endless feasting and mead. But if you look closely at what archaeologists have unearthed in longhouses, storage pits, and even ship burials, you find a story of nutrition so advanced it could stand alongside today's paleo or keto trends. In fact, you'll discover that some of the foods Vikings ate are so powerful, you'll wonder why we ever stopped eating them. This is the story of forgotten Viking superfoods and how they fueled warriors, shield maidens, and explorers to achieve the impossible. Part 1. Barley, the Viking power grain. If there was one grain that defined the Viking age, it wasn't wheat or rye. It was barley. Why barley was essential? Barley was hardy. It grew in poor, rocky soils where wheat would fail, and it thrived in the short, cold summers of Scandinavia. For Vikings, this was crucial. Their farms couldn't waste time on delicate crops, they needed something dependable. Barley gave them just that. But more than just surviving the climate, barley was incredibly versatile. Vikings used it in porridge, flatbreads, stews, and perhaps most famously in brewing their ale. Archaeological finds at Viking farmsteads consistently show large amounts of barley grains stored in pits and barns, often charred from ancient fires, preserved for us to study. Nutritional powerhouse. Modern nutritionists have rediscovered barley's benefits. High in fiber, barley contains beta-glucans, which regulate blood sugar and strengthen the immune system. Rich in minerals like iron, magnesium, and selenium, all vital for warriors marching into battle. Protein-dense compared to other ancient grains, helping muscles recover after long voyages or combat. This was a grain that kept bellies full, but also bodies strong. The ale factor. But barley's greatest role may have been in Viking ale. This wasn't the light, refreshing beer we know today. It was thick, hearty, and sometimes flavored with herbs like juniper or yarrow. It wasn't just for drinking at feasts. Ale was safer than water, provided quick calories, and even acted as a mild antiseptic. Imagine a Viking setting sail across the North Sea. What did he pack? Dried fish? Yes. Meat? Sometimes. But above all, sacks of barley. It wasn't just food, it was fuel. Part 2. Viking Superberries, nature's multivitamin. When you picture a Viking feast, your mind probably goes to roasted boar or barrels of ale. But some of the most powerful Viking foods weren't animal at all, they were berries. In the harsh northern climate, fresh fruits were rare and seasonal. Yet Vikings relied on wild berries not just for flavor, but as vital sources of vitamins, antioxidants, and long-term survival. These tiny bursts of nutrition were nothing less than life-saving superfoods. Lingonberries, the Viking cranberry. Small, red, and tart, lingonberries grew wild across Scandinavia. Vikings harvested them in bulk, eating them fresh during the summer and preserving them for the long winters. Nutritional profile. Lingonberries are packed with vitamin C, antioxidants, and natural compounds that fight urinary and digestive infections. Preservation. Their natural acidity meant they lasted longer without spoiling. Vikings often stored them in honey or mixed them into mead, essentially creating one of the world's first energy tonics. Practical use. In a world where scurvy could devastate sailors, lingonberries provided a vital shield against vitamin deficiencies. Cloudberries, the golden treasure. Even rarer were cloudberries, sometimes called the gold of the north. These bright orange fruits grew in bogs and tundra, making them difficult to find and harvest. But their value was immense. Vitamin C powerhouse. Cloudberries contain 3 times more vitamin C than oranges. For Vikings, this made them a natural survival tool on sea voyages where fresh produce was scarce. Antioxidants and omega oils. Cloudberries carried both antioxidant compounds and healthy fatty acids, unusual for a fruit. This combination boosted immunity and reduced inflammation after grueling physical exertion. Prestige food. Because they were so rare, cloudberries weren't just eaten for health, they were also status symbols. A Viking chieftain serving cloudberries at a feast sent a message: wealth, power, and control over resources. Bilberries and blueberries, eye strengtheners. Vikings also ate bilberries, close relatives of modern blueberries. These small, dark berries were prized not just for their sweetness, but for their effect on eyesight. Night vision myth. While modern studies show bilberries may aid vision health, Viking sagas hint at warriors consuming them before raids, perhaps believing they sharpen night vision. Imagine a Viking raider rowing through the fog, strengthened by handfuls of bilberries as if eating nature's battle rations. Blood health. Bilberries also strengthened circulation and reduced fatigue, allowing warriors to fight longer without exhaustion. The survival role of berries. For Vikings, berries weren't treats, they were strategic food. Women and children often foraged for them, gathering enough to dry or mash into pastes. Stored in wooden barrels with honey, berries became winter preserves rich in vitamins long after other fruits spoiled. In the dead of winter, when salted meat and dried fish dominated meals, a spoonful of berry preserves wasn't just a luxury, it was survival medicine. Part 3. Viking Seeds and Nuts. The energy boosters. If berries were the Vikings' natural medicine, then seeds and nuts were their fuel packs. Compact, calorie-dense, and packed with essential oils, they were the perfect food to carry on voyages or to sustain warriors through long campaigns. In a world without trail mix or protein bars, the Vikings had their own version, and it came straight from nature. Flax seeds, the Viking omega-3 secret. The humble flax plant was one of the most important crops in Viking society. Most people know it today for linen fabric, but its seeds were equally valuable. Nutritional value. Flax seeds are loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, protein, and fiber. For Vikings, these seeds offered long-lasting energy and supported joint and heart health. Preparation. Vikings ground flax seeds into coarse meal, sprinkling it into porridge, bread, or even mixing it with honey to make a sticky, portable energy ball. Survival edge. These seeds were small but mighty, perfect for voyages across the sea where fresh food wasn't guaranteed. They provided nutrients that meat and fish alone couldn't deliver. Hazelnuts. The Viking protein bomb. Excavations of Viking settlements often uncover large storage pits filled with hazelnut shells. These were more than snacks, they were survival food. Protein and fat-rich. Hazelnuts gave Vikings concentrated calories that didn't spoil quickly. Foraging and trade. They grew wild across northern Europe, meaning even poorer farmers or thralls could collect them. But they were also traded across regions, making them a staple in both peasant and aristocratic diets. Energy and motion. Warriors on the march or sailors at sea could eat handfuls of hazelnuts for quick bursts of energy without cooking. They were essentially the Viking power bar. Hemp seeds, forgotten strength food. Evidence suggests Vikings also consumed hemp seeds. While hemp is often associated with fiber or oil, its seeds are surprisingly nutritious. Nutrient profile. Packed with omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, as well as protein, hemp seeds provided balanced nutrition. Resilience food. In hard times, when crops failed, hemp seeds could still deliver high-quality calories. Cultural note. Some Viking Age finds hint at hemp being used medicinally, though seeds themselves were likely eaten much like flax. How seeds and nuts were stored and carried. Seeds and nuts were easy to dry and store. Vikings often kept them in linen sacks or wooden barrels, and they could last through the winter without spoiling. For long journeys, they were invaluable, lightweight, nutritious, and portable. Imagine a Viking setting out on a raid. In one hand, a battle axe. In the other, a pouch of hazelnuts. To him, this wasn't just a snack, it was survival insurance. The modern connection. Today, flax seeds and hemp are hailed as superfoods in the health community. People sprinkle them on yogurt, blend them in smoothies, or bake them into bread. Yet, over 1,000 years ago, Vikings were already harnessing their power not out of trendiness, but necessity. Seeds and nuts weren't optional extras in the Viking diet. They were strategic food, small, concentrated bursts of nutrition that kept them moving, rowing, and fighting long after others would collapse from fatigue. Part 4. The Viking Ocean Pantry Fish, Shellfish, and Sea Superfoods. The sea wasn't just a highway for Viking raids and exploration, it was their supermarket, pharmacy, and survival lifeline. From fish packed with protein to shellfish brimming with minerals, the ocean gave Vikings foods so rich in nutrition they could outlast starvation, endure long voyages, and even heal faster after battles. Herring, the Vikings' lifeline. If one food deserves the title of Viking survival staple, it's herring. This small, oily fish was abundant in northern waters and could be caught in massive shoals. Preservation methods. Vikings mastered preservation techniques, salting, drying, and smoking herring so it lasted months. Bundles of dried fish have been found in archaeological digs, proving just how critical it was. Nutritional benefits. Herring provided protein, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, and calcium, exactly what was needed to fight rickets, repair muscles, and survive harsh winters. Cultural role: in some sagas, herring is described as the fish that fills 100 ships, underlining how essential it was not only to diet, but to trade. Salmon, the warrior's feast. Salmon, especially Atlantic salmon, was a prized catch. Unlike herring, which was eaten daily, salmon was a status food reserved for feasts or special occasions. Nutritional value: rich in omega-3s, vitamin B12, and high-quality protein. Salmon boosted energy and endurance. Symbol of abundance. In Viking poetry, serving salmon was a mark of generosity and wealth, a way for chieftains to impress their guests. Preservation. Vikings sometimes smoked or air-dried salmon, but it was often enjoyed fresh, especially in coastal settlements. Shellfish, the hidden superfood. Clams, mussels, and oysters lined the coasts where Vikings lived and traveled. Though rarely celebrated in sagas, shellfish were quietly crucial to nutrition. Mineral-rich, shellfish provided zinc, iron, and iodine, all essential for immunity and thyroid health. Easy access. Gathering shellfish required little effort compared to hunting or fishing. Children and thralls often collected them at low tide. Protein on the move. They could be eaten fresh or cooked quickly in stews, making them perfect for busy longhouses. Seaweed, the overlooked Viking superfood. We don't often imagine Vikings eating seaweed, but archaeological evidence suggests they did. In coastal Norway and Iceland, seaweed was dried, stored, and consumed as part of meals or given to livestock. Nutrient density. Seaweed is rich in iodine, calcium, magnesium, and trace minerals that were hard to find elsewhere. Medicinal uses. Some types were even used to treat wounds or stomach issues. Viking survival hack. On long sea voyages, seaweed may have been chewed or boiled into broths, helping to prevent deficiencies. Cod liver oil. The original supplement. Cod liver oil is sold in modern health stores as a vitamin D and omega-3 supplement. Vikings didn't refine it into bottles, but they did consume it. How it was used. The oil was extracted from fish livers during cooking and sometimes consumed directly or mixed into food. Health benefits. In dark Scandinavian winters where sunlight was scarce, cod liver oil was a natural way to fight vitamin D deficiency and keep bones strong. Endurance booster. It wasn't pleasant, but it worked a warrior fueled by fish, and fish oils could row for hours or recover faster after battle. The sea as a superfood source. The ocean gave Vikings foods that were unmatched in nutrition. Protein, omega oils, minerals, and vitamins all came from their nets, hooks, and tide pools. Without the sea's bounty, Viking voyages might have been impossible. When you think of modern superfoods, people often point to chia seeds, spirulina, or salmon supplements. The Vikings didn't need health stores. They had their ocean pantry, and it sustained them with shocking effectiveness. Part 5. Dairy powerhouses, Skyr, cheese, and whey. When most people picture Vikings, they imagine roaring warriors with horned helmets. A myth, of course. But what if I told you some of their greatest strength came not from meat or fish, but from dairy? Cows, goats, and sheep were more than just livestock. They were nutrient factories. Vikings consumed their milk in many ingenious forms, creating foods that fueled everyday labor, long voyages, and even warfare. Skyr, the Viking yogurt that survived 1,000 years. If there's one Viking superfood that still exists today, it's Skyr. What it is? A thick, cultured dairy similar to yogurt, but technically a type of soft cheese. Nutritional punch: high in protein, low in fat, rich in calcium and probiotics. Skyr gave Vikings strong bones, gut health, and energy for long days in the field or at sea. Longevity food. Archaeological finds in Iceland show skyr was stored in clay vessels and eaten for centuries. Its ability to last long without refrigeration made it a perfect survival food. Cultural continuity. Skyr is still eaten in Iceland today, almost unchanged from Viking times, a living taste of the past. Cheese Viking energy bars. Cheese was another essential. Not only was it easier to store than milk, it was portable, durable, and calorie-dense, basically the Viking version of an energy bar. Everyday cheese, made from cow, goat, or sheep milk, cheese was pressed and aged, sometimes smoked for preservation. Nutritional benefits. High in fat and protein, cheese gave long-lasting energy. It was especially valuable for warriors who could carry it during campaigns. Cultural note: cheese appears in medieval texts describing trade and dowries, showing it was valued beyond simple survival. Whey, the forgotten energy drink. When Vikings made cheese or skyr, they separated the liquid byproduct, whey. Modern athletes drink whey protein shakes, but the Vikings discovered this natural supplement centuries earlier. How they used it: whey was drunk as a refreshing beverage, sometimes slightly fermented. It provided electrolytes and protein in liquid form. Hydration aid: on hot days in the fields or during voyages, whey worked like a natural sports drink, keeping laborers hydrated and fueled. Cultural evidence: the Old Norse word mysa, whey, still survives in Scandinavian languages, proving its importance in diet and culture. Butter, a luxury of strength. Though less common than skyr or cheese, butter was highly prized. It was often salted or stored in barrels to last through the winter. Nutritional density: rich in fats, vitamins A and D, butter was a compact energy source. Status symbol: high-quality butter was traded and gifted, making it not just food, but wealth. Winter survival: in lean times, a single chunk of butter could provide the calories to push through freezing months. Milk: more than just a drink. Milk itself was consumed fresh but more often transformed into longer-lasting products. Children especially benefited from milk, while adults preferred it in fermented or processed forms. Everyday sustenance: milk fueled growth and development, supplementing the grain and fish-heavy diet. Seasonal rhythm: fresh milk was abundant in summer and scarce in winter, shaping how Vikings managed their food cycles. Dairy as a Viking superfood arsenal. In many modern diets, dairy is debated or even avoided, but for Vikings, it was a pillar of survival. Skyr built their resilience, cheese stored their strength, whey hydrated their warriors, and butter carried them through the winter. The fact that skyr still exists today, eaten by athletes and health-conscious people worldwide, is proof that Viking wisdom wasn't just practical, it was ahead of its time. Part 6. Viking antioxidant bombs: fruits, nuts, and wild berries. When we think of Viking food, most imagine meat roasting over a fire or fish pulled fresh from the sea. But what often gets overlooked is the incredible variety of plant-based superfoods that Vikings gathered, cultivated, and preserved. These foods weren't just for flavor, they were nutritional powerhouses that protected their bodies from disease, fueled their long voyages, and even helped them heal. Berries: nature's Viking medicine. The Nordic landscape was filled with berries, and Vikings harvested them in massive quantities. Far from simple snacks, these berries were packed with antioxidants, vitamin C, and healing properties. Lingonberries: sour red berries still popular in Scandinavia today. Rich in antioxidants, they strengthened the immune system and fought infections. Preserved easily in honey or as jam-like pastes. Bilberries: wild blueberries. These small, dark berries contained high levels of anthocyanins, improving vision and circulation, critical for long nights at sea or in battle. Cloudberries: golden, tart berries found in northern bogs. They were a rare delicacy but extremely rich in vitamin C, preventing scurvy during the dark winter months. Elderberries: used for syrups and tonics, known for boosting immunity and easing colds. Berries could be dried, fermented into wines, or preserved in honey, allowing Vikings to enjoy them long after harvest season. Nuts: dense fuel in small packages. Though not as abundant as grains or dairy, nuts were considered high-value energy foods. Archaeological sites reveal evidence of hazelnuts in particular. Hazelnuts: native to Northern Europe, these were likely roasted and stored in bulk. They provided fats, proteins, and fiber perfect for sustaining energy on voyages. Trade for walnuts and almonds. While not local, some nuts reached Viking lands through trade. They were expensive luxuries, but their nutritional value made them worth the cost. Nuts acted like Viking trail mix: portable, non-perishable, and calorie-dense. A small handful could fuel hours of work or rowing. Wild apples and crab apples. Vikings also enjoyed small, tart varieties of wild apples. These were not the sweet orchard apples we know today, but they were still valuable sources of vitamins and natural sugars. Often dried or cooked down into mushes, sometimes fermented into cider, giving Vikings a morale-boosting drink. Crab apples, though sour, could be sweetened with honey and mixed with grains to create early fruit porridges. Herbs and greens: Viking healing plants. Beyond fruits and nuts, Vikings foraged for wild herbs and greens that served dual purposes: nutrition and medicine. Nettles: high in iron and vitamins, nettles were eaten as soups or teas. Perfect for combating fatigue and anemia. Wild garlic: added flavor while boosting immunity. Angelica root: one of the most prized Viking plants. It was chewed fresh or dried, believed to fight infections and lung issues. Greenland Norse even shipped it back to Europe for trade. Dandelion leaves: bitter but nutrient-rich, likely added to spring meals after the harsh winter. Honey, the Viking super sweetener. No section on Viking plant-based superfoods would be complete without honey. While not technically a fruit or nut, honey was a universal food preserver, medicine, and sweetener. Used to preserve berries and herbs, fermented into mead, the legendary Viking drink, applied to wounds for its natural antibacterial properties. Honey wasn't just food, it was a survival tool, both in the kitchen and in healing practices. Why these were superfoods? Modern diets praise antioxidants, vitamins, and natural sugars for boosting health and preventing disease. The Vikings figured this out naturally without science. Their berries strengthened immune systems, their nuts fueled stamina, their herbs doubled as medicine, and their honey provided sweetness and healing in one package. These weren't just survival foods. They were the Viking equivalent of supplements and energy gels, keeping them alive and strong in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Part 7. Meat, Organs, and Blood. The Viking Nutrient Bombs. If grains and berries gave Vikings stamina, it was meat and animal products that forged their reputation as some of the most physically powerful warriors in history. But unlike modern diets that often discard organ meats or avoid blood, Vikings consumed every single part of the animal. Nothing was wasted, and much of it was packed with nutrients that scientists today recognize as critical for health and performance. Organ meats, the true superfoods. To the Vikings, the organs of animals were sacred fuel. Unlike muscle cuts, which were tasty but less nutritionally dense, organs contained megadoses of vitamins and minerals. Liver, packed with vitamin A, B12, iron, and folate. Eating liver gave Viking warriors the energy to row for hours and fight without exhaustion. Kidneys, rich in protein and selenium, they supported immune function and hormone balance. Heart, considered both symbolic and nutritional. High in CoQ10, which supports cardiovascular strength, it was believed to transfer courage and vitality to whoever ate it. Lungs, sometimes boiled into stews difficult to eat but used in times of scarcity. In modern nutrition circles, liver and heart are hailed as nature's multivitamins. The Vikings instinctively knew this. Blood as food and medicine. Blood was never wasted. It was a high-protein, iron-rich resource, and the Vikings turned it into both meals and rituals. Blood sausages, mixed with grains, fat, and herbs, then stuffed into intestines. A calorie-dense, portable food perfect for voyages. Blood pancakes, a mix of blood and flour fried into thin cakes. Strange to modern palates, but rich in iron and energy. Medicinal uses. Blood was sometimes drunk fresh in ceremonies or given to the sick in small doses. It symbolized life force and vitality. While unsettling to us, Viking reliance on blood meant they maximized every animal's nutrition. Bone marrow and broths. Even bones weren't discarded. Vikings split them open to scoop out marrow, a fatty, nutrient-rich paste that was both filling and medicinal. Marrow provided healthy fats, essential for brain function and energy. Bones were boiled into broths that released minerals like calcium and magnesium. These broths kept people nourished during harsh winters when food was scarce. Fat as fuel. Unlike modern health trends that once demonized fat, the Vikings embraced it. Fat was the most calorie-dense macronutrient, and in cold northern climates, it was essential. Whale blubber, used as cooking fat or eaten directly, provided omega-3 fatty acids which supported heart and brain health. Sheep and cow fat, rendered into tallow for frying or mixing with grains. Seal fat, consumed in coastal regions, highly prized for its energy content. This heavy reliance on fat wasn't just cultural, it was a biological necessity. Fat kept Vikings warm and energized when carbs were limited. Fermented meats, a dangerous superfood. In times when preservation was key, Vikings turned to fermentation. Fish and meats were buried, hung, or stored underground to ferment slowly. Hakarl, fermented shark, an Icelandic delicacy with ammonia-heavy taste. While toxic fresh, fermentation broke down poisons and made it edible. Rotted fish and meats, smelly but packed with preserved protein. Vikings believed fermented foods built gut strength. Fermented meats were risky but essential survival hacks that doubled as superfoods in terms of shelf life and nutrient density. Symbolism of eating meat. To Vikings, eating certain animal parts carried spiritual meaning. Eating a wolf's heart was thought to pass on its ferocity. Consuming a bear's liver was believed to channel its strength. Animal sacrifices often ended with feasting on the very creatures offered to the gods, reinforcing the belief that eating connected them with divine forces. The lost Viking diet lessons from the past. When we look back at the Viking world, it's tempting to see only the violence, the raids, and the longships cutting across stormy seas. But beneath the clash of swords and the roar of warriors lies something quieter and perhaps even more shocking. The Vikings weren't just brutal fighters, they were pioneers of nutrition. Their so-called superfoods weren't packaged powders or trendy supplements. They were berries plucked from frozen tundra, grains cultivated against all odds, fish dried in the salty spray of the sea, and organ meats consumed with reverence. The Viking diet was raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically primal. Yet it fueled some of the most physically resilient people in history. Strength in scarcity. Viking lands were harsh, icy winters, short growing seasons, and unforgiving seas. Unlike the fertile fields of Rome or the breadbaskets of Egypt, Scandinavia was no paradise. Food was scarce, and survival meant creativity, adaptability, and zero waste. That's why every scrap of food mattered. Grain wasn't just bread, it was beer, porridge, and blood sausage filler. Fish wasn't just eaten fresh, it was dried, smoked, or buried to ferment. Animals weren't slaughtered for muscle alone, their blood, organs, marrow, and even fat became the foundation of survival. The lesson? The Viking superfood system wasn't about luxury, it was about turning scarcity into strength. Nutrition modern science now confirms. What's fascinating is that modern nutrition science now validates much of what the Vikings practiced instinctively. Organ meats, rich in vitamins and minerals far beyond regular cuts of meat. Fermented foods, packed with probiotics for gut health and long-term preservation. Fish oils and fatty meats, high in omega-3s, supporting brain and heart health. Berries and wild greens, natural antioxidants that strengthened immunity. In today's world of processed snacks and empty calories, the Viking approach looks less barbaric and more revolutionary. The spiritual side of eating. For Vikings, food wasn't only about survival. It was tied to myth, ritual, and identity. Eating the heart of a beast meant absorbing its strength. Sharing blood sausage at a feast reinforced community ties. Drinking mead wasn't just celebration, it was communion with the gods. To eat was to connect with both nature and the divine. Every meal carried meaning. Every bite was part of the saga. Would you survive the Viking diet? It's easy to romanticize Viking food today, but let's be honest, much of it would horrify modern eaters. Fermented shark reeking of ammonia, blood pancakes, sour barley gruel, and strong cheeses crawling with life. These were foods born of necessity, not comfort. Yet, they worked. They built warriors capable of rowing for days without stopping, surviving winters without fresh crops, and storming into battle with terrifying endurance. Ask yourself this: if you ate like a Viking, could you handle it? Or would you tap out after the first mouthful of blood pudding? The legacy of Viking superfoods. Though centuries have passed, the Viking diet still challenges us to rethink what healthy means. It wasn't about cutting carbs, counting calories, or trendy cleanses. It was about using every resource, respecting every harvest, and understanding that food was power. The Vikings remind us that survival isn't about luxury, it's about resilience. And sometimes the most shocking, disgusting, or forgotten ingredients can hold the greatest strength. So, the next time you see a trendy superfood marketed as the latest health craze, remember this. Long before chia seeds, quinoa, or kale smoothies, the Vikings were fueling themselves with berries, blood, liver, fish, and fermented shark. And it worked so well that their legend still endures 1,000 years later.